Right, well, this picture here was taken by my dad in the 30s, and I'm sorry for going off subject here because as of today here, we're kind of snowed in here at the moment in England, and I can't go up to Bennix, which is what I was going to do, and do some filming up there. And I was going to do some filming with some of my other cars. But at the moment, because Bennix is not open today, because of the snow, they can't get there, and there's no working going on at my place. In fact, they've taken all the machinery away at the moment. And that job's been held up, all the road, for a week or two now until the snow melts. We've got thick snow, and I can't really do too much with the car, so I thought I would just have a little interlude and explain perhaps a little bit about my background and the fact that it has influenced my feeling and why I said some of the things I said in my last episode 17, about the snow. And I'm a little bit cynical with the news about weather and all these people almost dying because of a few inches of snow and they've never seen anything, the world's coming to an end and all this crap. So my background is perhaps a little different to some people, and I'm not saying it's unique. Of course it's not unique, but I'll just tell it as it is. And this is just a little précis because fortunately my dad took a lot of photographs in his life. He didn't particularly have a lot of money when he was young or anything, but he did manage to take some photographs. And so anyway, now my dad, he's in this photograph here. He's on the front row on the right with the scarf. This was taken sometime about 1926 maybe, and it was taken outside Edmonton on the prairie. My dad was born in Edmonton. His father, my grandfather, he came to Canada from the Ukraine, from an area, a town near, a little village near Brody, which is in now, I think at that time it was part of the Principality of Galicia. It wasn't actually, it was even part of Poland perhaps, but it switched around, now it's part of the Ukraine, but he was Ukrainian. And anyway, he came to Canada, and a lot of his brothers came over separately, and they all started up farms outside of Edmonton on the prairie, but my grandfather didn't. He was a miner, coal miner, so he worked in the mines and he built himself a house. So my grandfather built a house actually, and it's this house here, but this was taken later on. This was taken, I think, in the 60s. So my grandfather got a plot of land outside of Edmonton, which the government gave him, and he built this house. When he built it, not when this picture was taken, obviously, but when he did build it, it was on its own with a fair bit of land around it, and that's how it was when my dad was born. But then gradually the city expanded, and his house there was incorporated, as you see it there, into a street, and they built other houses around it. And I think he sold off a lot of the land, but he ended up with a house here. And that's where my dad grew up, in that house, with his brothers and sister. And they had, originally when my dad was young, they didn't have these houses next to them. They had cows that they kept and chickens. And they used to farm some potatoes for extra money. My dad used to sell them to restaurants in Edmonton when he was young. So this picture here now, my dad, his mother died in 1929 when he was 9 years old, and my grandfather married again and had a couple more kids, but my dad didn't get on with his stepmother, so he left home. So they went and worked in the timber industry, and this is a picture of my dad driving some horses where they were pulling logs out of the forest. Now, prior to the Second World War, my dad and a couple of his friends, they decided to go rafting through the Rockies, and this was one picture of him. That's him. They tried to, I think they were going down the Mackenzie River. Another shot of them here. I think the three of them. I don't know how, maybe there were four, because I don't know who took the picture, but that's my dad there. I think that's him on the right. But anyway, that was not too long before the war. But then, obviously, the war broke out in 1939, and my dad actually was up near Jasper at the time, and him and his mates, they decided to sign up to go over to Europe. Right, this picture was taken in 1939. My dad had signed up to go to Europe. He was in the army, and this picture was taken. That's him and his sister, and that was taken in Edmonton. So my dad then went over to Europe, went to England with his brother. They both signed up together. His younger brother, who was about 18 months younger than him, and they went to Europe together. My dad was involved in many, I wouldn't say escapades, many operations in Europe, and he was involved heavily with motorcycles. I just mention that because motorcycles played a big part in his life in later years. But while he was over there, he met my mum. They got married, and then I was born at the end of the war. And so this here is a picture of me. This was in East London. This was during the war, the end of the war. That's my dad, and that's me. And we were in East London. But as soon as the war ended, my dad went back to Canada with my mum and me. When we went back to Canada, we stayed a lot on one of my dad's uncle's farms outside Edmonton, and this is a picture of me, obviously not long after we arrived in Alberta, and it's my dad on the horse with me. And this is on the farm that would have been his uncle's. And there's my mum. Now this is an interesting picture because this one is that's my mum and me, and on the farm, and the young girl on the right, she's still alive, and she remembers me arriving here, and I've seen her quite a few times, and in fact I'm visiting her in about 4 weeks' time on my next trip to Alberta. So that's quite interesting. So there's a big connection here. So there's me and her, and we're a lot older now, so we're going to meet up again in a few weeks. Right, so let's get on to some cars. This is my dad's Buick, and this is, you can see here that this is Canada. This is snow. This was normal. Certainly, I remember all the time driving around in conditions like this. So this was a gas station, I guess, out in Alberta, and this was one of my dad's first cars. There's a picture there of my mum, and that's me standing, and then that's my brother. So they've still got the same Buick. I think that was outside a house we lived in Edmonton, so that was in Edmonton itself. And there's a picture there of my dad and me and my brother, and that's out somewhere in the prairie. Snow. I tried to find some snow pictures here. There's me in the snow in Alberta. And there's my mum with my brother, and there's me down in the bank in the snow. That's there again, out in the prairie. And the picture my dad took, I don't know why, but I think he was trying to show all the icicles and mud, everything that's on his Buick, his old Buick. So there we are. There's the Buick. Now you can see that it will have cross-ply tires. It's going to have to drive all through these country roads. Obviously these roads were gravel, so that helped a lot, because when you've got powdered snow and your wheels can at least get through down to the gravel, you've got some traction there. Notice there's a blanket over the radiator, because of course now these cars were really basic, eh? These were cars which now we consider pretty basic and crappy old cars. They were going out into the prairie in these conditions, and it was pretty cold. I mean, that I don't know how cold it was there, obviously, but it does get down to, I mean, I've been out in the prairie when it's 25, 30 below zero, and been driving around in it, and these cars were expected to drive around in that sort of temperature, and the people went out. I mean, so my dad got in this car, took me, my brother and my mother, and we were out in the prairie here, and there were no mobile phones and no helicopters, rescue, all that sort of stuff. You were on your own out there. Certainly in Alberta in that period. Picture of me on the running board of that Buick. Now, that's just a little picture of me with some of my car collection, or maybe with all my car collection when I was a kid. So I took an early interest in cars. And of course, it was cold all the time in the winters there, and we were dressed up warm, and we had parkas, so it kept us warm. Now, there's a picture of me on a hunting trip with my dad. Actually, that's not my dad. That picture, my dad's taking the picture. So that's his friend, and they were out shooting moose, and that's me on the moose. I don't think that's something that kids are going to do much of these days. I don't know. I just don't know. And there's me, riding a horse. Not sure where that was taken, but that was me on a horse in the early days. And there's a picture of me on a sort of bull or something. I mean, or it's a cow, but not a bull. But sort of my dad trying to introduce me to the rodeo back in the early days, because that's what people did, or at least my dad did. He said, you got to toughen up, and one day you might want to ride a cow, so start young. There's me in a old steam train. They were still running them when I was a kid in Canada. And there's me on a toboggan. That was at the backyard of our house in Edmonton. And then, of course, we spent a lot of time up in the Rockies. My dad had a lot of friends up there, and that was one of our old cars. That's an old Nash, which we had for quite a while. That's another car my dad had at the time, Buick, 48 or 49 Buick. That was out in the prairie. There's another Buick, because me with the Buick, that was probably a 52 Buick. So that would be a 52 or something like that. The picture was taken. And there's me in the back of my dad's Chrysler Town and Country. Me sitting in the back seat. That car actually blew a head gasket in the Rockies, just outside Banff, and we stayed in a motel out there. I remember, and this was in the winter, waiting for a head gasket to be brought up from Spokane. And the roads were so bad that it took a week before they could get the head gasket, new head gasket, up to fix the car. Now this was in Ottawa. There's me on the left. There's just a snow scene in a car. That's a friend of ours, and that was a Oldsmobile, 59 Oldsmobile, I think that was. But my dad had a lot of cars in the 50s, and this was a Cadillac that he had, 56. It was a 56 Cadillac at a drive-in theatre. That was the drive-in theatre in Calgary, just outside Calgary. And there's a picture there of an old gas station on the one of the old prairie towns. Might have been Olds, a town called Olds or Red Deer. There's another one there. These were typical of the sort of gas stations that we used to pull into to get gas and get a Coke or something like that. Another picture of me, look, driving a bulldozer. Anyway, just finally, because this is just going to get boring, my dad was very into motorbikes, and he had Honda Gold Wings and a lot of other bikes all through the 60s and 70s, and even when he got older. Now this is a picture of him when he was in his 80s. He was in his mid-80s here, and this is his Valkyrie, Honda Valkyrie. That's a 1600cc, I think, six-cylinder car bike. And I think there's another picture of him. Yeah, here he is. So this is him and his Valkyrie. Now, when he was, I think he was 85 at the time, he took me out on the back of it. I've got pictures somewhere of it, but we went out. He was riding, obviously, and I was pillion, and he was 85. It was a bit hairy, to be honest with you. But anyway, here we go. I'll finish off with this is me and my wife in the snow with some of our dogs back in 1991. This was in Thetford Forest, and you can see that it snowed then. So snow isn't new, and you know, my experience with snow goes back, and other things, goes back to when I was a child. And then I get to listen to the radio, and I hear that I love the expression too, the younger generation called snowflakes, and it's about what they are, to be honest with you. I'm not too sure why I'm doing this video, but I just felt that when you look back, each of us have our own life experience, and there are some people out there that have had some fantastic experiences. Mine is not great, obviously, in any way, but I just wanted you to know that, you know, when I'm cynical about some things, at least I'm cynical based on my life and looking back on some of the things that I've done and my family have done. And there's a lot more that I could say about my family and my dad and what he did in the war and what his father did in the Ukraine, and what a lot of my uncles did in Canada in the 30s and 40s and in the Rockies. And when you compare those stories and life experiences with what some people now are going on about, the world today, it's pitiful, to be honest with you, really pitiful. Anyway, I'm going to end it here, and I think I'm going to stick to cars, so hopefully I'll be back at Bennett's in a day or two.